alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. In the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God. What is up, everybody? Welcome here to PCP Movie Night. It's actually Pop Culture Philosophers. It's actually Horrorfest. And this is the show that I am looking forward to the most. We're about to talk about the work of one of my favorite directors in the history of cinema. We're about to talk about two of my absolute favorite movies, and we're about to talk about, in my opinion, the greatest sequel of all time. Tonight, we're going old school. Here for Horrorfest, we're talking about Frankenstein from 1931, and we're talking about The Bride of Frankenstein from 1935, directed by James Whale, starring Boris Karloff, the Uncanny, before the X-Men even existed. Before that was even a thought in the back of Kirby and Lee's heads, Karloff was the Uncanny. You know what I'm saying? And I'm excited to have this celebration tonight of these two classic movies. Let's bring in the panelists. Jelani, what's up, man?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! I mean, you got to put some stuff into it, man.
It's alive. Hashtag Colin Clive. Oh, dude,
right.
That's some nice rhythm to it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, Colin Clive, man. He was awesome in this film, and this film is awesome. I'm glad to talk about it.
Hell yeah.
Karloff,
Both of them are awesome. Speaking of both of them, Brooks has two distinctive halves of his personality. I don't know which one we're getting tonight. Brooks is here. What is up, Brooks?
It's the good one.
It's a good one. All right. And every time we got to every time we cover something good, truly culturally significant, or ridiculous, like Surf Ninjas coming up, we got Joe Corallo in the house. What is up, my man?
I am so excited for Surf Ninjas.
I was very surprised that you picked that one.
I remember it was years before I saw it, but it was the trailer of it was on like multiple VHSs I had as a kid. And I just remember it was like this, like alluring, like, what is this thing? It's got surfing, it's got ninjas, it's got Rob Schneider, it's got Leslie Nielsen as a child. You know, what else is there? Yeah. And for years, that line from the trailer of Brothers Don't Surf was just like ingrained in my head, just all these things. And I'm like, what the hell is this movie? And then, you know, I finally saw it, and, you know, maybe I came up with better ideas in my head having seen the trailer multiple times, but I think it's worth discussing.
I think it is too. In fact, it's not available on Blu-ray, so I just recently got my DVD copy of Surf Ninjas End. So I'm very excited for that. We also, speaking of DVDs, we got Mike the 06 in the house. What is up, my man?
Nice.
You're muted.
Station.
There you go. Station. Pop, pop. Boo.
Boom.
Boo.
So
happy you're here, Mike.
I'm glad to be here. It's going to be fun. So
yeah, it's going to be fun. Let's just dive into this shit, okay? I love Universal monsters. I love these Universal pictures from the 30s and the 40s. Y'all know this. I've done movie watch-alongs, live movie commentaries. Some of the first movie reviews we ever did on this channel was Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Wolf. Like, I love these movies, and every Horrorfest, I gotta throw one of them in, right? Last year it was Creature. The year before that, The Wolfman. This year I was like, let's do it. Let's talk about it. James Whale's Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. So we're going to start with Frankenstein, 1931. James Whale had made a splash with a play in the UK called Journey's End. It's about World War I because James Whale was in World War I, right? And he was actually a prisoner of war during that. So we had a lot of stuff to say. And Journey's End was a play that eventually got made into a movie. And I am such a James Whale fan. I have seen Journey's End. I've seen Waterloo Bridge. I've seen Showboat. Like, I love this dude's work, and I cannot wait to get into this. So he's a darling, if you will, of Universal Pictures in the Carl Laemmle era, right? And so Showboat was actually kind of bankrupted them. Anyway, so he did Journey's End. He's known to be a director of dialogue. They're trying to get into talkies now. This is when all of a sudden we introduce dialogue and sound into film.
Those fancy talking pictures.
Exactly. They're those talkies. You know, we have decades and decades and decades of them now. But at this time, it was something new. Todd Browning did a good job with Dracula, but he didn't know how to direct a talkie yet, right? So bring in someone from the stage, someone who was an amazing creative visionary on the stage, see what they can do on the screen. And at a certain point, James Whale felt like he was going to be typecast as the war director because he had done so many war films. Waterloo Bridge is one which is amazing, which stars Mae Clark, who plays Elizabeth in this movie. If you've never seen Waterloo Bridge, it is so far ahead of its time. It's still ahead of its time. Like, seriously, James Whale is a visionary to me. So he didn't want to be typecast as the war movie director. So he goes into Frankenstein, which then typecasts him as the horror movie director. Anyway, Frankenstein. I love this film. I love all of these films, but Frankenstein, like Dracula, like the first Mummy, they stand out against some of the other stuff. The amazing makeup design by Jack Pierce. Nobody's topped that. Like, I don't think there's been, like, I love all the cool effects we get in these horror films we talk about on Horrorfest, on Dylan's horror show. By the way, Dylan is so close to 1K. Everybody sub up Dylan's horror show. If we got a mod in the chat, please, Two Gun, you're in there. Throw out the link to Dylan's horror show. We're so close to 1K. I want to get him to 1K before Saturday. Anyway, James Whale picked this movie not to be typecast. He created something so genuine. It's amazing. Jack Pierce crafted this movie makeup that to me is so iconic that it still hasn't been topped. Boris Karloff, a working actor discovered in the cafeteria. It's like this goddamn movie is writing itself about the backstage production of this. An absolutely brilliant film. One of the best films that's ever been filmed by one of the best directors who's ever worked in this medium, and 100% an iconic horror film that every horror film made after 1931 owes something to this movie. It's one of my favorites. I've rambled enough. Jelani, you've seen this movie many times. This is nobody's first viewing. However, what did you think about this movie on this time? What are your overall thoughts?
Man, I mean, who hasn't seen Frankenstein? I've loved this movie since I was a kid. I think this is one of my first like real little horror movies. I mean, like at 6 years old. I didn't even see the movies until I read the books. They had the little Universal monster books, like they had the Mummy and Dracula. They had Frankenstein as well, The Creature of Black Lagoon. I actually had those in the library of my school, and I was so interested in reading them that I ended up, wanting to see them. And I'm not sure how I watched them before. I don't know if they were just on television. I don't know if it was VHS. I don't remember the first time I ever saw it. But I mean, so I'd say around 6, and Frankenstein scared the monster itself, scares the crap out of me as a kid. Scared me to death. It's a big, tall, brooding thing. And I like the disclaimer at the beginning of the film, because it was so unnerving at that time that they had to have like Waldman come out and explain that this is going to happen in the film. I really like that. It feels like a stage play played out really well, like very, very well. And it
is based on the stage play more so than the book. Right? The Howard Dean? Was that the Howard Dean Productions or whatever it was?
I think so.
It was just like Dracula. It's same thing.
Yeah, but it's just that the way it's styled, it's beautiful, and it tells a brilliant story. It's I'm with the monster until he throws the girl in the water, and I'm just like, nope, he's a killer. Get him out. and then
Well,
that
that's
person
an
sees the
accident, though,
movie.
Jelani.
But it is a total accident. But I killed a kid, man. He wanted to float. You'll float too.
Some kids are just annoying, though.
Yeah, kids are annoying. That
Look
kid
at me.
was
I can make a
though.
boat. Mine floats. What do you expect? Like, the monster's like, oh, pretty things float in the water. You're a pretty little girl.
Like, how did she die too? It's like it didn't show her actually like in the water.
He drowned.
The biggest
He,
stretch
threw
of
in
the
the
whole
water.
thing. The
Like,
biggest
does
stretch
this
is
kid like not know how to swim?
well, the biggest stretch is when the dad finds his drowned daughter, sad as that may be, and then goes, the monster did it. What?
How do you know?
Like jump to conclusions a bit.
Yeah,
exactly.
The creature would be more likely to have been behind that one.
Yeah,
but we're not picking apart this movie tonight. Come
but
on,
yeah,
y'all. Come on.
I love this movie. I absolutely adore this movie. This is one of the greats. I mean, you can't not love Frankenstein. Like it's just one of those things. It's like breathing if you're a horror fan, or if you're just a casual. If you're just a casual fan, you should love Frankenstein. I mean, it's just
a fan of cinema. You should.
Not a fan of cinema in general. It's beautifully shot. The makeup is incredible. Everything. I know we're getting into that stuff, but man, this is such a wonderful. It's even a feast for the eyes now.
Yes,
that's how good it is. And I'm just like, oh, it's just shut up and take my money. It's just that good. So
it's so shut up and take my money that every time it gets re-released in a theater, I go see it again.
Go see it.
Brooks, Frankenstein, the first one. Overall thoughts. What do you think?
Well, I like this movie. I like the universe movies, but like I read the book when I was in high school, and it kind of it's one of my favorite books like of all time. Like I love Frankenstein, the book, and there's a lot of differences in the adaptation, but I can accept it for what it is. It's a movie of its time, and it's still really good. Like it feels like they're trying to kind of make this Shakespearean drama with this this story, which it fits because it's supposed to be a very moody and heavy story. It's like it's about like a kind of primal fear within us, like of like how if we've gone too far, like unleashing something beyond our control, and like it still holds up, man. It's still like enthralling, I guess you could say.
It's enthralling. It has subtext. It has all these layers. It's like, oh my goodness, elevated horror did not start with A24. It may have started in the 30s. I don't know. Maybe even the 20s. We could even go back further to the very beginning of film. And I think there's some elevated horror there. Good points, man. Joe Corallo.
Yes.
I send you the list first. Like out of everybody here. I mean, obviously Jelani and Brooks are on every episode, but like I always send you the list just to see what you want to do. Because I may be surprised by a Surf Ninja. But when you wanted to do this one, I was like, well, that makes sense. Because these are two of the greatest films. What do you think overall again about Frankenstein?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fantastic. There's a reason why Abbott and Costello wanted to meet Frankenstein before any of these other guys.
That's right.
And yeah, they met Dracula, but they never put that on the marquee. It's and
technically they never even met Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah, they did not. They met Frankenstein's monster, and it wasn't even Karloff.
It was Glenn Strange. Yeah. So, but still a good Frankenstein monster. So
yeah, but and I also appreciate that Karloff, what was it? He did like 3 of them, and then he was like, "I'm out, guys. Man had integrity, But
after Son, he's like, "I'm done. I'm done. Give it to Lon Chaney Jr. We're done. Come on."
Yeah. So it's that part's just great, but like just building on everything else. I did my research. I watched the Mr. Magoo special of Frankenstein recently. I'm like, this is coming up. I should brush up. But I mean, it's a story that's just been adapted in every country. Like, and a lot of it was not just the novel, but the success of the Universal film. I mean, you see, I've read, I have Junji Ito's, adaptation, that the manga adaptation. That it's just something that has, penetrated pop culture so thoroughly. You can't go. I feel like it'd be hard to go more than a week, if that, of not being engaged in some sort of media that hasn't at some point referenced, the idea of Frankenstein. And I mean, there are countless movies we have all watched where there are clips from Frankenstein, or they're watching Frankenstein on TV. It's just, it's everywhere, and there's a reason for that. And also, this is a film, like you were saying, they were like 4 years and change into Talkie Pictures' existence. Like straight up existence. I'm not sure the internet did anything as important as Frankenstein. Is there an echo?
It would be appropriate for a talkie production that we're doing here.
This is true, but no, there's the idea that they were able to do something like this that's just been so permanent in pop culture. So few steps in. This is like almost a decade before Citizen Kane.
Yes,
like this is like what, 7 years give or take before Superman existed.
Yeah,
like
or before The Wizard of Oz is like 7 8 years before that, and Gone with the Wind and all that other shit.
Yeah, this is like 5 or 6 years before Of Mice and Men. Like this is, and like, that John Steinbeck hack clearly watched that movie and was like, I'm gonna do that shit. Like that's 100%. Yeah, you heard it here.
And then Lon Chaney Jr. actually played Lenny in one of the productions of that, so that was really cool. When you think,
so
you
but
like
I'm just rambling at this point, so I'll move on.
You like it? I like that.
It's a good movie.
If anybody on the panel tonight says they don't like any of these movies, you're never invited back. Mike, you jumped at the chance to do this one as well, man. What did you think about Frankenstein?
Well, I know just a lot of people don't like. I mean, a lot of it's not elevated enough for them. There's a lot of people don't like these because they think they're slow, they're stupid. They don't really hold up over time. So I figured it would be an easy one to jump in and talk about because they're fun, and it's the first time we get to see Frankenberry brought to life. So,
Jesus.
Well, I mean, Frankenberry is the first thing of Frankenstein that I ever got to see. So then it was just like, oh, you get to watch the movie. This is where it came from. So I mean,
you got to learn about your cereals, man.
Yeah, cereals, and then it's just like, oh, Count Choculate's Dracula, Frankenberry's Frankenstein. Okay, cool. Like, let's watch this movie.
And Boo Berry is Peter Lorre. We get it. But what do you think about the film?
I love the film. I think it's great. It's not my favorite. It's my second favorite Universal monster film. So first one I saw was Creature, and that's the one that will always be pinnacle for me. I thought it was great. But Frankenstein is my second favorite. It's a wonderful film. Going back and rewatching this and looking at it through sort of like a cinematography kind of style breakdown, it was really interesting to watch, to see like what they were doing with all these basically practical effects. So
practical effects and sets. You know, like, and the crazy thing is, this is a 4x3 movie or whatever. So there's actually, I think, a slight more vertical information than horizontal or something. And James Whale made a point to make sure that every bit of the screen had information on it, right? And like the vertical height of these sets is unmatched in any other film I've ever seen, including Citizen Kane, which I think is the greatest film ever made. But there's something about it.
And it's when you did the Wolfman last year, right?
We did Creature last year, Wolfman the year before.
So it's Wolfman the year before. That's the one that I started paying it, like when you were talking about the sets in the background and all that. That's when I started paying attention to a lot of this. And then, like I said, I love the scene when they released the dogs. We were talking about vertical, so it looks like these dogs are running through these mountains and hills, and it gives the set and the scene just made it look like I know it's a set, but it looks like it's really in the mountains or a high up elevated area. So I thought it was cool.
Absolutely. All right. This movie has a fantastic cast. And there's so many great characters in this movie that I don't feel bad going first. I'm going to take Colin Clive as Dr. Henry Frankenstein. He is the titular character, right? Colin Clive was an alcoholic. He had a sad, tragic life. He died early, just a few years after making Bride of Frankenstein, actually. But he has an intensity in his performance. Now, he came up with James Whale because he was the main character in Journey's End. And even in the film adaptation, he's there. Colin Clive is brilliant. And maybe the first time I ever saw him was watching Weird Science when I was a kid. But that led me to watching the Frankenstein movies, to all the Universal movies. He kills it in this movie. He's not utilized as much in part 2 because there's other characters, I think, that outshine him. But in this one, even with the uncanny Karloff, he outshines everybody in this movie. That obsession, that madness permeates the entire experience of the film. It comes through the screen onto us, and I feel it 100%. What about you, Jelani? What's the character you want to highlight?
Well, you took mine, so it's okay. I knew it was going to get taken. But mine is going to be like Dwight Fry as Fritz.
Hell yeah.
Fritz is a funny fellow. I've always I think he may be, I just considered him just really dumb. Like, he was just our henchman. And especially the crime of breaking the good brain and taking the criminal brain, it always bothers me. I'm like, man, you got lightning, funny noises. Man, you a thief. You get in here and get the brain, get out.
Bro, I've seen you watch Paranormal Activity. I don't want to hear that shit. Like, you'll get scared at the slightest noise in a movie, man. So I understand. I love the bit they do
sleep
with Marty Feldman and Young Frankenstein when they do that whole bit. That's hilarious, man.
But I like that he's in Bride of Frankenstein too. They're playing a completely different henchman, but still a henchman. And
I think he might be in almost every Frankenstein movie. Because he's in Son. He plays a different character in all of these films.
Character in Son.
He just come off of Dracula doing Rainfield.
Yeah, it was Rainfield. Yeah.
Amazing performance. And everybody thinks of Igor. But the first time we get Igor is actually Bela Lugosi. In that, I guess that's Son, or no, that's Ghost.
That's Ghost of
Ghost when we get him.
Yeah.
But Fritz is the prototypical Igor, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And I just, he's just that dude, and messing with him with fire, messing with the monster with fire. It's just, you can't do that, man. Why are you?
And don't mess with me with fire, man.
Yep.
Dwight Fry is one of my favorite character actors from this time, man. He is absolutely amazing. That's a really great pick. What about you, Brooks? What's a performance you want to highlight?
Oh, Dwight Fry was my first pick, but my backup was, I guess, was it the Burgermeister?
The Burgermeister?
Yeah, the Burgermeister. He's like all these movies have a little hint of comedy in them, and he gets clowned on. I think he gets clowned on more in the second movie, but in this movie, it's kind of like he's just this bumbling idiot dude. Yeah, so I thought he was interesting. He was no Dwight Fry, but he did his job.
That's a good pull, man. He's the Burgermeister is also in part 2, but it's a different performer. But in this one, when he's talking to Henry's father, and he's like, "Good day," and he's like, "Good day, Herr Baron," and he's just pissed off about it. It is a really great bit of comedy, and James Whale threw that in all of his movies. What about you, Joe? What's a performance you want to highlight?
I think for this, I'm going to highlight Marilyn Harris as Little Marie. You know, she, I mean, she's really important in two scenes, but her selling either scene is so pivotal to this movie working. And everyone, like, if you're not referencing the scene where Frankenstein comes to life and it's alive and all that, the second most iconic scene is him with her at the water. Like, no question. And a child actor can absolutely ruin anything, and they do constantly. So for her to be able to do this and do this right and do this in 1931, 32 in that area with Boris Karloff looking like a legit monster, and you know, and she pulls it off, and she's friendly, and she's warm, and then she pulls off, you know, just like dangling, and like she really, you know,
Yeah.
that all is it's crazy how well that all meshes and works and sells the pivotal turning point of that film.
Absolutely. You're right. The way she just dangles there for a second there, I was like, did they fucking, what did they do to that kid? What did they do? This is 1931. This is a pre-code film, man. So like, who knows, right? Anyway, Mike, what's a performance you want to highlight?
I guess I want to talk about Mae Clarke and her role as Elizabeth. So the Burgermeister was my first one because I really didn't think anybody would take it. But then again, Brooks, you know, go figure. I thought she did a great job. She, I don't know because, like I said, I wasn't thinking.
She's a great performer.
Her performance was.
Well, she's in Waterloo Bridge, which is the movie I think Whale did right before this. And
What's
that whole story is about her. She's like a prostitute, and she's amazing in that fucking movie. And I get why they brought her in for Elizabeth in this one.
And like I can like she holds it well. She does really well, but it's just like my favorite scene with her is the hysteria laughing because I thought she was joking, and then when you're like, no, I'll go back and watch it again. She's actually being serious.
That was in
Bride. Or is that in Bride? Never mind.
Bride.
My bad. Confusing the films.
Watch these movies out of order for some reason. I don't know why he did, but he did.
I did. Okay, my bad. So it's not Mae Clarke then.
No, it is Mae Clarke, but it's the wrong Elizabeth. Anyway, Mae Clarke's awesome in this movie. I'm just gonna say that. Okay?
She is awesome in this movie, but it sucks that she plays more of a damsel and doesn't have. You really don't get to see her at her best, I should say.
Okay, I can dig on that. Style and structure. I've touched on this so much. James Whale is such a great visual director. He was able to capture this German expressionism that was going on at the time. The in comic book terms, we would call it spotting blacks. The way that he does that, the way with his, along with the cinematographer, this movie is beautifully shot. It is absolutely a masterpiece for its time with the resources that they had. It's incredibly shot. It's more based on the stage play than it is the book, but it still has that core theme of the story carried through. I love it. Style, structure. What do you think, Jelani?
Oh yeah, I mean it's still a masterpiece. This is a 1931. This wasn't even a thing. This is beautifully shot. All of those angles, all the angles pre-Dutch angle, were beautiful, and the set pieces were fantastic. I love the graveyard scenes. I don't know what it is about that graveyard, but I knew it was like we were talking about. You know, it's a set, but that feeling where you still feel immersed, like it grips you from beginning to end. And you know, you got to take time with the originals. This is before all the flashiness and our attention spans are gone. But it really paces itself well. It tells its story. It gets in there and gets out. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it is really good. And you were talking about that graveyard scene. One of my favorite little bits. There's so much subtlety in this movie, but there's a moment when they come in and they're finally. I love the idea, by the way, that they're just chilling at the fucking graveyard for like what 6 hours it takes this dude to fucking bury this grave. Then they just go and fucking dig it up. It's been easier just go whack him on the fucking head and take the body. Anyway, they go and dig it up, and Henry, Colin Clive's character, takes a shovel full of dirt, and there's a statue of death behind him, and he throws the dirt right into the face of death, right? And that's a really cool visual cue about what's going on in the movie. Style and structure, Brooks, what do you think?
Well, I like the old timey Universal style. Like I've always liked, especially, and it works really well for horror movies. Especially with the black and white. They can get some really grim, like nice deep shadows and stuff in there. And also, I love those old timey like backdrops that they used to use in movies. Like I miss those. Like they look so like you can tell it's a backdrop. But at the same time, like you're watching the movie, so you gotta suspend your disbelief a little bit, and you can just enjoy it for like how good it looks. But yeah, this movie is like it's like I said, I think the one weakness this movie has is that it doesn't really build on the relationship between Henry, the doctor, and his creation, the monster. I think that part gets kind of rushed over a little bit, and in favor of more of like the drama between the human characters.
Well, this movie's 70 minutes long, right? So
Yeah.
there's that too, right?
Yeah, but I feel like there's some stuff they could have probably cut out to put some more of the.
Yeah, like that fucking dude that's trying to get with Elizabeth, even though she's clearly betrothed.
Victor.
Yeah, and Victor, right?
It's weird how they changed.
Victor's the name of the name of
Henry.
Frankenstein in the novel, and they change it, right? That's weird.
Yeah.
But there's that one great moment, and this would have never gotten by in a post-code world, and they dealt with way more censorship on Bride of Frankenstein. But the bit where he's like, I'm very fond of you or something. She's like, I wish you weren't, or like, no, she goes, I'm way too fond of you to think of you like that. And he goes, I wish you weren't. And she just goes, Victor. He's like, I'm sorry. And it's just so like, it's just so awkward and weird. It's like, bro, you're trying so hard to get some Mae Clark in your life, and I understand. I get it, man. It's okay. It is what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Joe, what do you think about the style and structure?
No, I really love it. It's so moody and yeah, it's that mixture of there was clearly some effort going into making certain scenes stylized, like especially like the graveyard scenes and when they're running around outside, like it's all very like it's very clear that people like Tim Burton were a big fan of scenes like that.
For sure.
And you see it like hyper exaggerated in films by people like him, but I love that kind of stuff. I love the interweaving some elements of comedy as well that people have pointed out. But in addition, there's so many things that are like, every time I watch, I always forget like little things that I'm then reminded, like, oh yeah, that was an interesting choice. Like when Fritz drops the brain, it's like a wide shot. It's not like a close up and he drops it. It's like, like interesting choices like that. And it's the kind of thing.
It lets you hear that noise when it reverberates across the room almost, right? Like it's so
yeah. It's a really interesting choice because I would think like almost anyone else directing that scene would have done a close up. And the fact that he didn't, like, like stuff like that in the film, where you're like, oh wow, like that's a bold move. I'm into that. Like that is some carefully crafted cinematography, because again, any other director, I guarantee you, would have been like, oh, you just zoom in and crashes and that's it. But I think he went for a bold choice that paid off, and there's multiple examples of that in the film, but that one really stood out to me. But but yeah, like absolutely. I don't think the film gets enough credit for some of the more bold choices just throughout the entirety of it.
Absolutely, especially because there wasn't so many examples of moving the camera and creating atmosphere with lighting at this day. You know what I'm saying, Mike? What do you think about style and structure?
So the a lot of things that y'all talked about, and it's a lot of contrast between with the in the lighting of how they used your overall lighting and your spotlighting, and then also if you go back and look at a lot of the film, it's shot wide. Everything of importance is there's a close up or it's a medium style shot. So with the everything from the graveyard scene to the scene at the end when they're running up towards the windmill, like even all that, like the whole it's the simpleness, but it's also one of those like it's much like a play, like we've all said, but it's also it kind of draws you in because the way that it is, it keeps you in. So it's just like for everything that's wide, it makes you to feel like you were there. You're a part of it. Like the scene in when he's taking the brains, I always felt like we're just like a fly on the wall or a mouse in the room. Like we're just watching him sneak in because, like you said, like they would have had him up close and him come lifting the window up, coming through it. But no, it was just a medium shot, and they kind of panned out to get the whole entire room, and that's what it was. So that's what it was to me. It was just kind of like it just gives you this like a voyeur style of it, like you're part of the movie, like you're a character, you're with it, and it's just that a lot of that's done too with the lighting of just how everything is backlit, and then the use of the smoke. That's really cool, and it really pops with the black and white because the smoke hit the lights hitting the smoke. It gives it that nice contrast between the different colors. So, but I said as everything else, it's pretty cool.
Hell yeah. Well, every great music has some good music, or every great movie has some great music attached to it. Jelani, what do you think about the music in this film? You're muted.
Mike, I'm doing your bit. Man, but what I was saying was like I love this music. It's the
I'm just
very
joking,
beginning.
man. There's no music in this movie, Jelani. There's no music in this movie. It's a joke. There's no music in Frankenstein. The very title has music, but the rest of it doesn't.
Oh, sorry, I'm still singing.
You're Swan Lake.
There's
That's
music.
Dracula. Nah,
Oh,
there's no music in Frankenstein. Anyway, we're just moving on.
Dadgummit.
It was a
I love
joke
that
I
music.
was trying to do. I was trying to
And
get.
I was doing the bit.
I didn't notice the music. Anyway, it's time to rate the movie.
No.
Frankenstein. Out of 5 you digs, what do you give it, Jelani?
2, it's terrible. Never watched this film. How dare you? No, I'm kidding. This is a 5, clearly. I've seen it like 20 times, 30 times in my life. It's a quick watch. It's rewatchable. You can always put this in a rotation. If there's any rotation, you watch Universal Monsters, at least the basics, and get them out of the way. And this is the first one you watch. So it just depends. I like it. It's very good. It's spooky when it needs to be. It's shot beautifully. Boris Karloff is amazing as this childlike creature that is also a terrifying killer. And the merger of the two and the way he balances it. I mean, he's hands down the best character in this film because like the people were scared to show his face, and they finally showed it in the film, and it's like you get that close up of his face and how gnarly he looks, and you're just like yeah.
And they do those cuts, right? Instead of a zoom, they do those cuts. It's so cool, man.
And the fact it's shot this way, and all of everything we said on top of that. If you haven't watched these, please get out here and figure this out. I mean, watch this one. Definitely a 5.
Hell yeah. What about you, Brooks?
I'd give this one a 4.5. I want to give it a 5, but I feel like Bride is a better movie, really. I kind of see them as sort of like, it feels like, both Frankenstein and Bride together would make like, kind of covers like the story of the book Frankenstein. So in a way, it kind of feels like, that this movie is just part one of like like what they would do these days if they did a Frankenstein movie, like Frankenstein Part 1 and Frankenstein Part 2. But I mean, it's still got some really good scenes and moments and like, great acting. It's just a fun movie. Just not quite a 5.
I'm telling you, man, if they didn't ever do Bride of Frankenstein, you would have given this a 5. So I don't know
Probably, yeah.
I don't know why you would peg this down.
But they did make Bride though.
Yeah, what the fuck ever. You're
did
pissing
make
me
Bride.
off right now. Joe, what do you think?
I mean, it would be.
Motherfucker, Brooks, I'm sorry. 4.5 because it's not as good as
He's
Bride.
wanting all 5s.
Man,
Damn.
fuck you, man.
No, it's fine. I mean, for the impact on everything, and for also like it also gives us indirectly a fantastic portrayal of Bela Lugosi in Tim Burton's Ed Wood, with him hating Boris Karloff so much because of all the because of what he tried to do, because he couldn't just be another monster in a film. And here we go. This is where things go. So for all of those
down
reasons.
the role of the monster, in case anybody doesn't know, because there were no speaking parts, and he was like, "Oh, I can't do a movie with no speaking parts," and he kind of had a animosity towards Karloff ever since.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna say absolutely a 5. It's hard to like. It would be hard, I think, to argue against the idea like out of all the Universal monster movies, this is probably the most influential. It might be by a hair, but in terms of what it did, references, the amount of people who have like copied this, I think Dracula's close, but I think Frankenstein edges it out in terms of cultural impact. So yeah, definitely a 5.
Nice. What about you, Mike? What do you think? And you out there in the chat, drop your ratings in the chat right now, please.
Man, I don't want to give it a 4 or 5 because I don't want to get yelled at and hated. So I guess I'm gonna have to give it a 5.
You give it whatever the fuck you want, but I'm just saying I will judge.
Streak's already been broken. Anything goes now.
I kind of really agree with Brooks, because like it takes like Bride takes leaps and bounds above this movie. But then again, like if you look at it, like there's so much.
Yeah, but they made this movie in a cave with scraps. Like, come on, bruh.
I know I have not given my review yet. Just let me finish what I got to say. But it's like, but if you go back and look at the time period of when this was, like, it wasn't, everything was leaps and bounds. Like it was always learning. It's more like this was better than the films that they did the previous years. So it's a growing medium or growing format. So it's one of those for what it is, like everything that they did, like just between the lighting, the cinematography, the story. Well, I mean, the story's not really original, but you get what I'm saying. Like the acting for what it is was good. So I'll just go ahead and give it a 5. So
okay. All right. We got a 5.69 from Chill Out Man. Goes above and beyond there. Figure Drawing gives it a 5. William gives it a 5. I'm gonna go 5. I think the movie's fucking awesome. I don't think it's necessarily as good as Bride of Frankenstein. We're about to talk about that, but I'll give it a 5 because I think this is an influential film. I think it's an incredible film. I think it's a masterful film. This is 5 you digs all day long. So we have all on the panel given it 5, except for Brooks, We gave it 4.5, but that still results in a PCP average of 5 you digs. Anyway, I gotta go cool down. We're gonna be coming right back after this break to talk about Bride of Frankenstein. Brooks, you're pissing me off, man. All right, welcome back, everybody. I just want to point out real quick that Brooks gave a perfect score of 5 you digs to Reanimator last year.
I think Reanimator, I don't know.
But he gave 4.5 to Frankenstein because it's not as good as Bride of Frankenstein. I'm sorry that Bride of Reanimator wasn't as good as the first one. But goddamn. Anyway, we're about to talk about Bride of Frankenstein. All right, so let's dive into that shit. All right, so James Whale, after Frankenstein, massive success. They kept trying to get him to do a sequel. James Whale's like, I'm not down for sequels. Bro, we're talking about 1931. The sequel didn't exist. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's like, nah, man, that sounds lame. However, it eventually sounded cool enough, right? But he did, in the meantime, 2 massively influential horror films. The Old Dark House, which is an underappreciated Universal horror classic that we have to cover here one day, maybe next year for Horrorfest. And also The Invisible Man. Fucking another great movie. And then finally in 1935, he was like, you know, whatever. We're losing you a lot of money with Showboat right now. Let's do Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein is the exception to the rule. No sequel is as good as the original. Maybe some people say Godfather 2, right? Some people may even say Dawn of the Dead is better than Night of the Living Dead. I don't think that's necessarily a sequel. I think it's just a thematic kind of tie-in or whatever. However, I would argue that the greatest sequel of all time is Bride of Frankenstein because it takes everything that was established in the first film. It adds the idea that, I don't know, Brooks, they've been making movies for 4 more years in the short history of motion pictures. But I think it's beautifully amazing. The only sad thing is we don't have the uncensored version of this film because now we have the code to fuck around with. We look at these movies. Universal Horror has some really great pre-code movies. And it's not just Dracula. It's not just Frankenstein. Murders the Rue Morgue is one of those ones, for instance. Black Cat is one of them. But like when the code gets involved and the movie that James Whale decided he would do was Dracula's Daughter, which is a very impactful and important horror film, in my opinion. But he didn't do that. Instead, he wound up doing Bride of Frankenstein. He had so many rules. He's like, we got to have this prologue or I won't fucking do it. The monsters got to talk or I won't fucking do it. We're going to have music this time or I won't fucking do it. Right? There was so many things, caveats, if you will, that he put in place. And this is a visionary director imposing his willpower on a studio in which he's under contract for, right? Bride of Frankenstein, I already said Frankenstein's a masterpiece. Bride of Frankenstein is beyond a masterpiece. This is, to me, one of the greatest films ever made. I fucking love it. I think it's beautiful. I think it's brilliant. Everything we liked about the first one is elevated in the second one. Once again, they were making elevated horror in the 30s. Somebody call A24 and half of horror YouTube, please, because these movies meant something. They were based on literary works of grandiose fiction, right? And they were treated with such. There is much more to me of the identity and the vision of James Whale impressed on this film than any of his other films, except for maybe outside of Waterloo Bridge. Like, holy shit. I fucking love this movie. It goes deep. It says a lot. Cinematography is great. The music is great. We were joking around. There's no music in the first Frankenstein, really. But in this one, there is. And some people don't like necessarily the idea that each character has a theme. No, it works. I love shit like that. That's a musical kind of thing. James Whale is a stage, musical, song and dance kind of dude, right? He loves that shit. He loves that the bride has that mom. And even when they're just talking about her, they bring it up. Her presence permeates the film, even though we only get her in the very last bit, right? Because they also choose Elsa Lanchester to play her as well as Mary Shelley. I fucking love this movie. It's the most badass shit. Y'all gonna really piss me off if you give this less than a goddamn 5. All of y'all out there. Jelani, what do you think about this movie overall? I don't want to bully y'all. I want y'all to be honest and true.
When you dig, fuck this film. I'm out. This is the She-Hulk of horror. It's so derivative. Yeah, man, this is a great film. I mean, I agree 100%. It's, I mean, come on. It's Bride of Frankenstein. And it does up the ante. And it makes the monster, like, more relatable. And it's a part of the story. So it's a great continuation. It's fantastic all around. I mean, Elsa Lanchester plays her role, like, perfect. She's not even in this movie long enough to be the bride. And it's so iconic of that scream and how much you see that so often. I haven't watched this as much as I watched Frankenstein, but I do appreciate it very much. Like every character in this, even Fritz number 2 is playing an awesome role in this, except for that lady, that shrill lady. Oh, that's in the house, the maid,
the housekeeper. She's
my god,
dude. Apparently, James Whale was enamored with her. Just thought she was the funniest shit.
Like he put her in every scene, and I'm like, why?
I love that bit though when she's like, "All right, like, I wash my hands of it. It's all on you now. If anybody dies, basically,
you're done, and it's out." But I just found her shrill. But other than that, this is a brilliant film. I mean, it's Boris Karloff, like his freaking opus, like him talking, like that was a big deal. I'm pretty sure they were like, the monster talks, and he talks a lot. And I've got my favorite.
Not as much as he does in the book, because in the book he's like,
upon this,
he's got better grammar than all of us. Yeah, he's got better grammar and syntax and narrative and language use than all of us, including Joe. And Joe's a goddamn writer. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, it's
true.
It's special that it's very special, and it's a beautifully shot as well. Overall, it's a fantastic movie. I love it. I love the the set design for this one a lot better than the other film. I
There's a
like the
story.
gears,
I
the
hate to
nuts and
interrupt you.
bolts of it.
There's a story where Elsa Lanchester says that at one point in between shooting some scenes, James Whale was giddy to show her the forest set. Like, because he comes from a stage background and he was a production designer. He was the stage set design, right? And so, like, it's like Ridley Scott's kind of like that. He comes from production design. You can feel that in James Whale's films. He's like, Ridley Scott is the modern day James Whale, if that makes sense. Like, he cares so much about design and what is on that frame. It's fucking beautiful. And even though we can see the wrinkles in the curtains in the background, it just looks amazing. And like the shit, like the forest. So like at the very beginning of the movie, when Frankenstein, the monster, is trying to, he's free,
running.
right?
Yeah.
It's lush. But then when they're chasing him, there's not a single bit of vegetation on those trees. And it's just so stark and like, holy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Exactly, dude.
These movies.
I understand you enjoy it. I might give it a 5. We can continue. Good.
All right, Brooks, what do you think about this one overall? Bride of Frankenstein. I hope you like it because it's not as good as his predecessor, or is it better?
It's good. I like it. But yeah, actually, this movie, it kind of gives me what I think the first movie was lacking, which is like more the monster's dilemma, like, you know, his angst, you know, because that's a big part of the whole story of Frankenstein. This creature is like he's lost. He doesn't know what he's doing. Like, you know, when he hurts people, it's like he's not intending it. It's like, you know, he's just this massive thing. He doesn't have any control over himself. It feels like, you know, in the first movie, he's like just woken up. You know, he can't talk. He doesn't really know much, but, you know, he does know a few things. He knows how to walk. He can move. He can, you know, defend himself if he needs to. But in this movie, like, you finally get to see him, like, you know, when he befriends the blind guy, he learns to talk. Like, he learns to...
The blind guy played by Gene Hackman.
Yeah, man, like, every time I see that scene, I expect the soup scene where he's, like, you know, gets the soup bowl out.
You're always, like, confusing the scenes together, you know? Because Mel Brooks did that shit so well.
Yeah, he did.
But, yeah, and like Karloff's performance, I think, is like he gets more to do. You know, he gets to, you know, speak. You know, he gives the creature a voice, not as much as a voice as he would have had in the book. You know, because like we were saying earlier, in the book he's like all fucking. He's like a Shakespearean like tragic hero who fucking like will go on and on about his angst and woes.
I love that book, but sometimes when I read it, I'm like, will you shut the fuck up, Adam? Like,
yeah, he's like he's a e-boy. He's an emotional, he's a sensitive boy.
This is like reading Gerard Way's notebooks. Like, I don't fucking know, but yeah, I get what you're saying, man.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, this is the Frankenstein movie that, you know, that I really wanted from the first one. Which I still love the first one, but I think it could have used a little more of a, you know, delving into the monster's anguish, I guess.
I dig that. I dig that 100%. It's in the first film, but in this one, I think James Whale had more control, even though he was dealing with the censors. Like, there's this great moment, if you notice, when the monster is going through the graveyard, and there's a statue of a crucified Christ, and there's a lot of religious iconography in this film, right? But there's a crucified Christ on the cross, and then there's like a bishop or a priest or some shit. And the original script was to have him mistake the crucified Christ as someone actually up there, and he was going to go and try to help them, right? And get them off the cross. And that to me is poignant in this movie. The monster is actually crucified in this movie. They raise him up on the tree, right? And I think that's what James Whale was doing with the design of those trees in the latter part of this film, was to make it look like crucifixion crosses almost in a way. But instead they were like, you can't do that. That's too sacrilegious. So instead he goes and just shoves down this fucking like Catholic priest or archbishop. That's way more impactful to me of a statement, like way more like transgressive, if you will, right? Hell yeah. Good film. Good film. Lots of shit put in there. Joe, what do you think about Bride of Frankenstein?
It's really good.
You say what you want, man. I'm not upset anymore. It's cool. I've calmed down.
No.
Brooks is 4.5.
No, but it's
Me.
really it's great. It's sort of it's interesting, like starting out with like Mary Shelley kind of being like, oh man, wasn't that awesome? And then they're all talking and she's like, that's not how I'd end it. Shit, this is what we did. And it's just great.
And how condescending Lord Byron is being there. Can you believe?
Lord Byron was like that though, dude.
I know.
Lord Byron was like the most dickish guy of his age, man. He would like actually start beefs with other poets and shit.
There's an element in there because he's like, can you believe from this bland and lovely brow, this chilling terror tale was brought, and she has this look at him like, I know, I got you. You know what I'm saying? I love that shit.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. I love how it seamlessly is just sort of like, let's just start it from exactly where we left off in the last movie. And it's nice because you don't get that anymore with movies. It's all either has to be completely planned out. But like, obviously when they ended that first Frankenstein movie, the idea wasn't, and then we've got all like, it's just like, we're going to leave it on a cliffhanger. So that way people are going to like, but it works. And it's still a seamless, like, okay, now we're just going to continue. Like that's tough to pull off. You never see that. And I think that adds to how great of a sequel it is. And like everyone was saying, it's building on what they already built. And one of the greatest sequences in either movie I mean, there's so many really great sequences, but at the end with the bride and she freaks out, I mean, it's like I try to even imagine like what it must have been like seeing that movie like in theaters and being like, oh my god, because at the time it's like they're building up to this. I would think the vast majority of audiences going to see this movie would not have expected that. You know, they would have been like, oh, they're making another monster, so of course she's going to be. And then like, and you know, it's the kind of thing, it really makes you think. It's what do they call it? Elevated horror, I think is the term.
Unfortunately, yes. I guess it's better than torture porn, right? Well, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, the important thing is no one made anything smart until a few years ago in anything. So
yeah, but that's always the case, isn't it, Joe?
It is 150% always the case. It's great. I fucking love it. It's always like, what? But is that any good? Like they did that already? Oh, anyway, it's a whole other discussion. But yeah, it's like incredible. You just watch that and you're like, wow. Like I can imagine people being like, oh, whoa, that's big, that's heavy, you know. And this shit's like, this is what, 1935, like, yeah. You know, and you know, we're still less than a decade into talkies.
Yes.
You know, and to pull something like that off,
we belong dead. We belong dead, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness. The understanding of the creature. The most human character in the entire franchise is the monster, is the creature.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. Man.
Our resident Excitable creature here on the PCP crew is Mike, the voice Matthews. Mike, what do you think about Bride of Frankenstein? I almost said Brian of Frankenstein. What? That's weird. Bride of Frankenstein. What do you think, Mike?
I mean, it's no Addams Family Values, okay? So...
Somebody did say that was one of their favorite sequels over Bride of Frankenstein in a recent chat. Was that you?
Yeah, so that you
some ridiculous shit to say, man.
Hey, Addams Family starts. It's continuation, just like Joe said.
Addams Family Values is good. Okay.
I mean, I think it's the best, it's probably the best continuous. It's better. So, I like this film. It's great. When you look at how everything was done, there's more effects brought in this time, more sound effects now, more music. The acting is still about as good as it was in the last one. Some new characters, which are great, which I'll let see what everybody picks. All around, it's just a fun film, and I think I like it better than I did Frankenstein. So, I mean, So there's that.
Okay, let's get into that cast of characters, and there's some really great ones to pick from. I don't mind going first, and I'm going to go Pretorius. Like, dude, my favorite character in all of these films is Ernest Thesiger as Dr. Pretorius. He kills this movie that is completely fabricated by James Whale and the screenwriter. It is completely made up. It's not part of the book that there's this other dude who's fucking macabre and darkly humorous and sardonic and just witty. And honestly, probably, we always talk about Grant Morrison likes to put themselves into comics, right? But like King Mob and shit and an Animal Man. This is James Whale putting himself in a fucking movie. Like, people say that this character is James Whale, right? 100%. He gets the best lines in both of the fucking movies. He's amazing. He nails it. He kills it. Let us toast to a new age of gods and monsters. Like, holy shit. Pretorius is that's my jam. Let's just say that. Delaney, what else you got? Performance to highlight.
So he's your Randy Orton. I get it. Okay. So I guess
come on, y'all. Pretorius is great, right? Again. Come on. Pretorius is great.
You took it again, but it's okay. All right. I will now
have
go
a backup, dude.
I
Always.
do.
Have you ever read the rundown? Because it literally says, have a few ready.
I got it.
Jelani, you always take the best character, so it's only fair that you don't get the best
No,
character.
I don't.
Yeah.
Jelani's like intentionally like, I'm going to show up first so I can. Yeah.
I'm gonna go first.
You're always
Go
second.
first, so I get the best.
First. Anyhow, I guess I'm going with the monster because monster was number 2. Boris Karloff nails it again. This time the monster does talk. That this time he is very straightforward in what he wants. He needs a mate. He needs it yesterday, like me. You know, all we had to do was drug him. I'd have kept him drugged, like in the lowest part of the thing. Have no access to this room. I'm doing this experiment. Have them give time to fix it. I like the movie The Bride. For some reason, I really enjoyed the little Sting.
Yeah, okay.
I like that movie because I like the development of the bride, the actual bride, and it's Jennifer Beals, and I love that movie. I don't know what it is. It's just like he falls in love with her, and like Adam's like chasing her, you know. And it's the same vibe. It's just lock him up, keep him somewhere else so he doesn't see her, so she doesn't scream and freak out, you know. And it was just them wanting to do more, and it was them pushing and pushing. And I like that character when it's sad. We are the monsters, you know, and it's so scary. It's sad. I like the ending for this movie because it feels final. And it feels final because it feels like that was the monster actually dying, giving up. You know, this is not what I need to be. I'm an abomination. I need to go. And I love his character for that. So Karloff plays that very well. I don't think anyone else does it any better. And he's the Mummy. He's a lot of things. Gosh, he's Fu Manchu, isn't he?
He's the Grinch.
He's the Grinch.
Narrator.
The man is. He's like.
He's an actor.
He's an actor. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And the direct inspiration for the Monster Mash. So,
yes.
Hell yeah. Brooks, what do you got? Performance you want to highlight?
Well, I mean, this is a pretty brief performance, but the bride herself was like, it's so like, it's an iconic performance, you know, just the way, like, you know, once you do the transition, you know, they wheel her up and like she's still in the bandages, and then all of a sudden like it shows her, and like it's like when did they give her this giant flowing dress with like fucking crazy ass drooping sleeves and shit? Like you think they want to give her something a little more, you know, less likely to trip over.
Yeah, they also don't unwrap her arms and shit, but it's a iconic makeup again.
But the most of it's in the head movements. she always has the eyes like wide ass open,
Bird-like.
like she's like taking in everything, and she's always twitching, moving that head around, and she's pretty massive, but she's also like the monster was in the first movie. She's very clumsy, she's still trying to figure things out, and she doesn't really have as much control over herself, and you can see that because when Frankenstein first, or the monster first shows up, she just she's screaming, she goes and hides behind Henry, she has like some kind of like instincts, she has like an idea of what she finds frightening, but it's just a great performance, I think, and to have like such little screen time too, and make that much of an impact was I think that's really impressive.
And also her playing Mary Shelley in the beginning.
Yeah.
Really
I like the way she played Mary Shelley. That's how I imagine that, those old timey aristocrat types would talk like this, exchanging their barbs and shit.
Yeah. One of the things that was edited out of this film was a lot of her cleavage shots, just in case anybody wants to know. What about you, Joe? What's a performance you want to highlight?
I'm going to go with the blind man.
I like him too.
I think that whole sequence, whereas drowning the girl in the first one is one of just the single most iconic that are outside It's Alive and everything. I think in this film, one of the single most iconic theme scenes was the whole bit where you actually you that again is a turning point in the film where you're seeing this is the first time we really see an extended scene of the monster getting to explore this new version of humanity it is.
Friend, good.
Yeah.
Oh, bad.
Smoke good. He's smoking some good weed, man. I'm just going to say that, man.
Oh, yeah. No, it's fantastic. But yeah, it really, elevates the film a lot. It's such a crucial scene that this movie needs. And you need him to really play it. He's, no, friend, what's going on? And that he still maintains this level of empathy for the monster even after these guys are no, dude, he's a serial killer, and he doesn't go well, in that case, give me the gun, I'll shoot him and I'm blind.
I can't know those guys from Adam either. Those fuckers, they could be lying.
Yeah, but it was still nice to see he's still he's confused and bewildered about it, but he's still no, that's my friend, and that's it really sells the monster as being redeemable, which the movie needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. That moment where he's why are you doing this? Oh my goodness, it breaks your heart, man. It really does. What about you, Mike? Speaking of breaking hearts, what's a performance you want to highlight?
The one scene that I like is, I think it's the Dwight Fry's character of Carl. When the doctor's yeah, we need to go get another heart. And it's 1,000 crowns for another heart. He's okay. And he just goes on the street and kills somebody.
Yeah.
And it's just yeah, I got a fresh heart. Here it is. And it's just yeah, I got it from a cop friend.
They should have made a movie about Carl.
Keep it on.
Could have been another Universal monster.
That's a good idea, actually.
Because
Carl the serial killer.
He's going around just killing people. It's where'd they get the brain from this one this time? It's kind of just, it's interesting of all that. But then again, I also liked Minnie, the lady that Jelani didn't like, her quirky one-liners, it's all.
I liked her scene in the beginning with the Burgermeister when she was dressing him down.
Yeah, and then because I think it was kind of a transfer from because the Burgermeister was kind of the comic relief in the first one, and then she became the comic relief in this one. So I thought she did a good job on that.
Some good picks. Style and structure, everything I said about the first one, but better, elevated to another level. The cinematography, the lights, the contrast between the lights and the shadow, the way it's structured. It's a little bit of a longer film, but it's still an hour and 15 minutes, y'all. It is so tightly constructed. and it does so much in so little time. What do you think about style and structure, Julian?
Oh yeah, I agree, man. It's the continuation of another great classic, and it's paced just as well. It tells that story to get to this conclusion. The characters, I mean, Pretorius alone, just sitting in that place, just with the body, with these bones. I hope her bones are firm.
Eat some
It's
lunch.
just-
He's like, I think I'm just gonna
Just
chill here.
eating and
I like this
chill and
place.
be with these bones, and it's I don't know why.
My favorite thing is they do a jump cut right to a few hours later. This motherfucker is drunk, laughing with this skeleton in front of him. Like it's just like this dude's crazy, man. I love it.
And like the fact, yeah, I don't know. He's just everything about this film. It is cut so well, like you can't really tell it's not a part of the previous film. Like it still goes on. Colin Clive's still there. He's almost dead and trying to recover from being thrown. I'm pretty sure he was supposed to die in the first one.
He did die in the original one, and then they tacked on that ending where he lived.
Yeah.
And James Well was so adamant that he died in the first one, he had to explain why he lived, even though at the end of the first one they explained that he's alive.
Yeah.
But his dad dies.
Right.
Like off
heart attack.
In the
like, how did he survive that? Dude like got thrown onto like a windmill blade.
If you watch that goddamn show, it's just like boom, dude, he's dead.
He's dead.
Come on.
It's flop.
Like that dummy is dead.
Yeah. It's a crazy cut film. It makes a lot of sense that it's the continuation. That's all I can say. It's beautiful.
What about you, Brooks? Style and structure of this one compared to the former Frankenstein?
That's good. I mean, you know, it feels the same, but you know, I think you know, having the monster established in the first one really helped this movie, you know, move along a little better. I think, you know, and it has some strange like things in it, like some weird choices, like you know, Pretorius's little dudes that he keeps in jars. I always found that scene like so weird, but at the same time, it's like I couldn't imagine the movie without it.
That was a complete James Well fabrication, by the way. Like he came up with that idea. Like that was.
It's like it's a weird little comedy bit.
Those effects hold up when he picks up the king.
Yeah.
With the tongs, like, dude, if She-Hulk did that, it would look terrible. Like I'm just gonna say that, okay?
The queen would be in her jar twerking.
Dude, and that scene is saying some shit. Because he's like, this one was so judgmental of the other two that we made him an archbishop. like it's so clever, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I loved it.
Hell yeah. Speaking of little dudes in jars, Joe has a collection of little dudes in jars. Just Joe actually really likes to make those, you know, where you can make like, you put some dirt and some water in a jar and you have an enclosed environment or whatever. I actually, during the pandemic, researched that like a mother. I was convinced I was going to do that. I'm glad I didn't, because then I just have a dirty fucking jar in my apartment. Anyway, speaking of dirty jars,
sure.
Whatever. Joe, what do you think about the style and structure?
I would have went with like a Bottle City of Candor thing, but this is fine.
Well, good luck with that one, bro. Or what are you, Dr. Pretorius himself? He can grow these little miniature lives.
But yeah, with this movie, I feel like you know, style and structure, it starts off a lot more lighthearted. Yeah, obviously it's hard when the first one is like starting at a cemetery. It's like almost anything you do is going to be more lighthearted, but it almost feels like the movie is like lulling you at first into this like false sense of like safety and security. Like, oh, I mean, the last one, that was a horrifying monster movie, and they killed that little girl, and they burned her to death at the end, and that was really, you know, gratuitous. And then you come to this, and it's like Mary Shelley's like, oh, I love writing, and then it's like, oh, well, what do you want to do? I wasn't finished with the story yet, and then we get that crazy old lady yelling for a while, and it like it feels like it's like lulling you a bit, be like, oh, okay. I mean, it's just a little goofier, and then it's like, oh my god, he just drowns this guy and then smacks a woman and she dies, and you know, like the movie feels like it leans into that because it does that so many times throughout the movie, where it's like, oh, this is goofy fun, and then oh my god, to leading up to a more devastating ending than the first movie. So this movie, I feel like it is a bit more of a roller coaster than the first movie. I think it feels like it's like sort of understands what it's doing. Like, you know, it's like Frankenstein's obviously the first time you're doing this thing, and then the I think what makes this sequel one of, if not the best sequels ever, is that it fully understands itself so quickly in a way that I don't think a lot of other movie sequels, especially ones that aren't like shot at the same time, get to do. And I think it really shows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing I want to point out is Jack Pierce's makeup in this movie for the bride is great, iconic, another iconic creation from Jack Pierce. But what he did with the Frankenstein monster with Boris Karloff, he's in a fire, so he's scarred. He's got shorter hair, but the hair grows throughout the movie, y'all. That's attention to detail, y'all.
Yeah.
That's something you don't see today. Somebody asked Scar, son of Hulk, you know, not to keep going the She-Hulk route, but it's too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah.
It's bad. Mike, what do you think about the style and structure of this film?
Well, one thing that I never understood about the whole Frankenstein movie is that you cut it was a bunch of different bodies all cut together and made into one. But so there's a lot of moving parts in there, like nerves and feelings and blood flow. And so I was always a little baffled about the drinking water scene when he was thirsty, because it was like none of that should be working because none of it should be connected. So,
but it is, because that's what Henry does, right? Like that's what he does. And then in Bride, combined with the idea that Pretorius can grow organs from scratch, he grows a brain, like a fresh brain, because the idea originally is that the abnormal brain is what causes this monster to have this criminal behavior. But in part 2, in Bride, what they're doing is they're telling us he just hasn't learned. He's been rejected by his creators from the moment of his birth. Like, that's a horrifying experience. The scariest thing that happens in these movies is what happens to the creature, right?
I love the scene when he's chained up, because he just like once everybody's gone, he just.
They nailed that in the first one, when all he's trying to do is just feel some sunlight. You know, like he's just trying to reach for the fucking sun, man. Like it's goddamn devastating to me. But it is meant to be pieced together. Now, they can't get as gnarly in 1931 and 1935 as they can today. Like even in the Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein from the 90s, which I like, very accurate to the book, but you see how that's not as riveting as the Stillwell version.
But it's just it's like, man, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
I just love how when they make the bride, they're like, well, we got to make sure we keep her pretty. Right? we got to make sure she can't have a square head. We're going to make sure we're going to cut her in the right ways. We're going to get the whole face on there. Like,
no, she didn't have bolts, did she?
No, she doesn't have the bolts, but she does have the electric bolt, like the lightning bolt, white in her hair.
Yeah.
So that was through those circles.
She does have a gnarly scar right here, dude.
Yeah, like a scar that goes all the way across her, like
that scar
chin.
is fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
So good use of makeup and effects, and then good use of a lot of the good practical effects, a lot of the set design, that whole elaborate system that they brought down to make, to get everything connected, and then the whole kites and getting all that to work. I love how the kites take flight because essentially it's just somebody off camera, just at a higher level, just pulling
I'm watching
the kite
that
off.
shit today, and I'm like, man, we need to go fly some kites, PCP Army. Like, let's go do. Like, I remember
I miss Kite Day.
Remember Kite Day? Oh my
Yeah.
god! Like, I want to
I
get
miss Kite Day.
Let's go fly kites in the spring, y'all. Let's get together,
Yeah.
man. Let's do it. Joe, you should come down to Alabama and fly kites with us.
PCP Army
Let me
Kite
know
Day.
when.
We'll plan it at the during the expo in April because we got Liana coming in for that. So like we can all just fly
Awesome.
kites together
Fly
one
kite.
afternoon.
There we go.
Everybody will be like, "Where's PCP?" and everybody at? They'll be like, "They're flying kites for 2 hours. They'll be back." Mike, you like the style and structure?
Yes, I did. It was it's a good film. I love the.
You were talking about the contrast. It goes deeper in this one, doesn't it?
It goes deeper. They use a lot more of the shadows, especially the low light, where you just see you just see outlines. You see the face. It's like a solo spotlight on the face, and everything's in dark. So it's essentially they did that a lot with Frankenstein. So I guess you could say it's just like he's coming out of the dark. He's coming out of the shadow. He's becoming more human and less monster.
Yeah.
There's the wood scene. I thought that was done well. Just the whole set design of it and everything. The different levels. I thought that was cool. So when the lady falls into the water, it has that nice little. It's like the same thing as somebody getting shot off a balcony in a western. Then what else? I love the. What's his face is the king and the archbishop and the queen. I know how to do that. I can't explain it for the life of me. That was so cool to see that in an old film.
And this one we call The Devil. It has a striking resemblance to me, but do I flatter myself?
But it's not. But it's not. It's because it's not animated. It's actually, it's animated, but it's played by real people. So it's just because it's. So like I said, I know how to do it.
Are you saying it's rotoscoped in some kind of way? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't really. I know what it is, and it's one of those.
I feel like they were playing with some of the ideas, some of the tricks that they came up with for the Invisible Man, where they can superimpose certain film on top of another, and because that's what they did with the Invisible Man, right, which he did right before this, right? But you like the style and structure? Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
All right, it's time to rate Bride of Frankenstein. Hope nobody pisses me off this time. Jelani, out of 5, you digs, and you out there in the chat, what do you give Bride of Frankenstein? What about you, Jelani? Kick us off.
I'm sorry. What? My bad. I don't like this one as much as the other one. I'm kidding. I'll give it 5. Of course, it's 5. It's a beautiful film, man. I like this one, and I like Sun. So, Sun is goofy.
I like Sun as well. Without Sun, we would never gotten Young Frankenstein.
We never got Young Frankenstein. Absolutely.
All that shit. Lighting the cigarette, that's the best.
You gotta have it.
Ever seen, man.
So yeah, it's a 5. This is a classic, man. These are timeless. You can't say you don't enjoy these films. Come on, man. Absolutely, 5. Hell
yeah. Robbie Bateman says we could all get together, fly kites, then grab some drinks at the newly opened PCP bar. Horny time work. Let's do it. I'm down for that. I think Campus 805 still has some spaces available. Rob, if you want to talk to me about that. Brooks, out of 5 you digs, what do you give Bride of Frankenstein? I'm just curious. Just curious, motherfucker. I'm just curious. What do you get? Well,
I want to give it a 5. So I will. It's a 5. I mean, I love this movie. It's great.
Surprising.
One of the best. It's not my favorite Frankenstein movie. It's probably my second favorite after Young Frankenstein.
Okay, yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I was talking about this earlier in my show with Dynamic Forces. We had Ken Hazer on tonight. And when I was talking about Frankenstein, I was like, these are the best double feature in the history of double features, the best sequel in the history. Nick Barucci barged into the room. And he's like, the best 2 Frankenstein films are Young Frankenstein. I can't remember what the second one he said was.
Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Yeah, it was Abbott and Costello. That's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love those movies. But come on, y'all. Come on. Joe, what about you? Bride of Frankenstein. What do you rate it?
5. I mean, it's really good. It's really, really good. And on top of that, though, unlike any of the other Universal monster films, they back-to-back put out 2 of the single most iconic monsters ever. Like, the Bride is an incredibly iconic character, especially for being in a film so briefly, but again, parodied and ripped off and homaged so much, just about as much as any other Universal monster. So it's really just an unparalleled film in that way.
For sure, absolutely. What about you, Mike? What do you rate it?
I can't give this movie a 5. I just can't. It's impossible to give it a 5. I have to give it a 5.25. So
we don't allow that bullshit. You can say a 5.69 if you want, but that's all we'll
5.25.
All right, so a 5 for Mike. For me, I'll
5.25.
I'll go a 5. I think this is a perfect fucking film. Like, I don't know what else to say. We've talked about it. It's a beautiful film. It resonates. It means a lot to me. And I think it still has relevant subtext. Maybe we'll get to that. So that means a 5 across the board for a PCP average of 5.25, 69 dudes. It's a little bit better than Frankenstein, but I can still give them the same fucking rating because I gave Reanimator a fucking 5. I gave Exorcist 3 a 5. How can I not give Bride of Frankenstein a 5? What is wrong with me with this Exorcist 3 love?
Exorcist 3 is great.
It's the greatest psychological thriller of the 90s.
Season of the Witch is awesome.
Season of the Witch is great.
Yeah.
By the way, I ranked my Halloween films last night. My favorite bit was when Joe, you commented, Joe, and you were like, so the first one's 1, and then you got a couple favorites, and then who gives a fuck about the rest? Kind of right, man. Like, honestly, kind of right.
About true.
Kind of right. Kind of right. No, I'm on beer tonight, but I've been drinking them, so I'm having fun tonight. All right. We're pop culture philosophers. Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. What are these movies saying to us, Jelani? What did you pick up from it thematically?
One should not play God because he'll might rot after it. So things like that. Just the hubris of thinking that you can just create life, just to do it. Not seeing the consequences of your actions, using other parts, just the way it was portrayed. I really think that like he tried to fly too high to the sun and his wings fell off.
Yeah.
So
like Icarus and then
like Icarus.
Like in that wonderful Eternals movie.
It's beautiful.
Oh yeah. What about you, Brooks? What's this movie? What are these movies saying to you?
Well, I think like a thing about kind of a theme of all the Frankenstein stories in general is kind of that if will our mankind's fear of death lead us to try and do something like throw dirt into the face of death, are we willing to go as far as we need to do that, and what are the consequences of it? It's like, when the atomic bomb was invented, like that was a point in history where like we had gone to a point where we created something that just completely changes everything about the way we live, and like, was it was the knowledge worth it? Sometimes things are best left, not explored. Like, it's just the fear of our own power in a way, I guess. And like, our potential and the potential to misuse that power and like just make things worse.
Hell yeah.
Mhm.
I can dig on that. What about you, Joe? What do you unpack from these films?
I think these films go into like it's a lot about the complexity and trauma and sort of there's a lot going on with family in particular. Henry's relationship with
Vin Diesel.
it's all about Vin Diesel. I'm sure he got lifted a lot from that, but it's got this ability like Henry's relationship with his father is awful. And then Henry, technically he creates a son and he has a shitty relationship with his son. And it's like this like generational trauma and the complexities of family interrelationships. The first sequel there, Bride of Frankenstein, starts with little Marie's parents both getting killed because of their daughter died, and then how they deal with it, and her, and the husband dies because he can't take that loss, and it kills her. If he stayed out of it, she wouldn't have died, and then. So you have all this, and then the bride, and there's an element of family there where, in a way, Henry and Dr. Pretorius, that whole bit, they're basically, the father-in-laws at that point that are like setting up their children. And,
My two dads.
Yeah.
Like the premise for that.
Yeah. So it's all about like sort of the horror that comes from just interpersonal relationships and family. It's the kind of thing you would expect in what's referred to now as elevated horror. Like
Really?
Because movies that did this before Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein would, be things like Hereditary, which changed the game forever by elevating horror and the horror of family. And then it would take years before Frankenstein, the Bride of Frankenstein, would come out and catch up to the groundwork that A24 set up for us.
You are right about that, man. 100%. What about you, Mike? What do you think these movies are saying to you?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the old guy. In a way, didn't he kind of wants revenge for the death of his daughter from the monster, and they want a lot of like revenge never works out that well. So I guess the importance of friends and isolation, and that everybody, it's like that old guy in the cabin, like he was alone and all he wanted was a friend, and Frankenstein's misunderstood, and he just wants to be accepted. And acceptance is an important thing, and you got to have friends to have to have acceptance in a way, because society just they don't accept you because they'll chase you with pitchforks and fire. So, and then I guess and then the whole playing God thing, the wanting to be powerful, like you shouldn't do that. It's not good.
Hell yeah.
Not a bit.
And you can get by with a little help from your friends.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? For me, you guys all nailed all that shit right there. So what I want to say is this. James Whale was an incredible visionary director, one of my favorite directors of all time. He was also, in the 30s, an openly gay man, which could not have been easy, right? And one of the things that gets picked up, and some people, what is the term? Is it queer coding? Where they talk about like how things could, in hindsight, when we know more information about some of the individuals that create art, we can read certain things into their art. But James Whale's longtime partner said that was not part of the Frankenstein movie, but it's definitely part of Bride of Frankenstein, right? We're talking about two men, one coming in to lure another man away from marriage to create life on their own, right? And the idea of the outsider, the monster, and it has nothing to do with James Whale being a gay man in the 30s, openly so, right? But it has everything to do with him understanding what it's like to be ridiculed, to be hated, to be outcast from the norm. And we get that with the monster. Even in the first movie, this dude's just trying to see some light. That's all he wants, is to see the fucking sun in this movie. They won't give it to him. And in the second one, he just wants some friendship. He's learning. It doesn't even matter that he's got Abby Normal's brain in his head. He's trying to learn, to experience the beauty and luxury of life, breathing, friendship, eating, drinking, smoking some good Chiba. You know what I'm saying? That's all he wants.
Smoke good.
Oh, good.
It's about the outsider's perspective. And if you look at so many of James Whale's films, including Waterloo Bridge, watch that fucking movie, y'all. All of his movies are about this. They are about someone on the outside, a subject of ridicule and torment and trauma and abuse, trying to find that identity, right? Trying to carve out their way. And James Whale fucking did that. And I'll wrap it up by saying this. If you like these movies and you like James Whale, like I do, watch all of his films that you can, right? What is it? Fuck. It's a World War II. It was a sequel to All Quiet on the Western Front, I believe, that he did. Road's End, I think, or something like that. But it was cut to hell because this movie was a World War II movie that was anti-German, anti-Italian in 1937, and they censored the shit out of that. We don't have the actual version of that film. I think it's Road's End. Anyway, all of his movies are about this outsider perspective. They're all amazing. I would also recommend a movie from the 90s starring Ian McKellen where he plays James Whale, Gods and Monsters. That movie's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And James Whale never backed down from his vision, never backed down from who he was, and even into the tragic end of his life, made a statement. You know what I'm saying? And my hat's off and a station and a pop boom to James fucking Whale, because that dude is amazing. And his life and his journey is the biggest part of me for these films. So that's what I think. So there you go. So thus concludes our awesome movie reviews for these two awesome films. And y'all, we're at the end of Horrorfest. Get a week left. But we're ending it with a bang. Saturday night on Dylan's Horror Show. Go sub up Dylan's Horror Show. He's just a couple subscribers away from 1K, y'all. Come on, let's get him to 1K before we talk about Pumpkinhead on Saturday night, one of his favorite movies. And then on Sunday, we're talking about David Cronenberg's Videodrome here on PCP Movie Night at a special time and place. And then a week from now on Halloween night, we're ending it all with the biggest bang we can come up with. Every single Nightmare on Elm Street film, including the shitty-ass remake from 2010. Why? Because we love y'all, and we want you to experience our joys and our pains as well. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Jelani, final thoughts?
Yeah, can't wait, man. This Horrorfest was fantastic. We've been having some absolute bangers. So I'm glad. I'm very glad we had some winners.
Hell yeah.
So keep watching us, guys. That's it. Buy the merch.
You know, buy the merch. What about you, Brooks? Final thoughts?
I'm dead. Love dead. Hate living.
You're wise beyond your years, or whatever he says, right? What about you, Joe? Final thoughts. Thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you for having me. This has been a great horror fest, and I am also going to recommend Gods and Monsters. It's a fantastic film for anyone who hasn't seen that yet.
100%. I think Ian McKellen was nominated for an Academy Award. I don't know if he won it, but he was definitely nominated. I think he may have won it. Bill Condon won for best screenplay, though. I think original screenplay or whatever. Anyway, it's a great movie. Y'all check it out. I don't know if it's on Blu-ray, but it should be. Mike, final thoughts. Thank you for being here, man.
Sub up to Dylan's Horror Show. Thanks for having me. It's great to see everybody. And then this is my last Horrorfest show, so I will see you sometime in December, maybe. Not sure yet, but it's been a fun month, 2 months. So
it's always a fun time at Horrorfest, and Horrorfest never ends on Dylan's Horror Show, so be sure to sub up Dylan's Horror Show. We're talking about Pumpkinhead on Saturday night. Here on PCP, we're talking about Videodrome on Sunday night. We're wrapping it all up with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. That's next Monday night, Halloween, 8 p.m. Central Time. Be here or be square or asleep, and Freddy will get your fucking ass. My final thoughts are just simply be you, because you're alive. You're alive. Holy shit, you're alive. And in the name of God, now we know what it feels like to be God. You know, they really had a problem with that line in 1931. Can you believe
Yeah, I bet.
Can you believe that? So we're going to end you with the Horrorfest teaser. This is a representation of every movie that we've covered for Horrorfest or still yet to cover. So thank you for being here. Pop, pop, boo.